Okay, in this example we are going to be working with three pieces of software to produce something that might outwardly seem quite complex. I'm going to be working with Adobe Media Encoder to add cue points to videos, which we will then respond to using ActionScript 3 in Flash to extract and respond to that information that's installed in a cue point, and then also trigger inside of a web page another JavaScript function, so to kind of illustrate the relationship between a Flash object inside of a HTML5 page and what can be achieved. Okay, so in this example what I've got is we're in a browser, we've got a HTML page, it's got a Flash object in it. The Flash object contains the video, and then to the right is just a basic iframe, and the iframe is just going to my page on eastridingmedia.co.uk. So when I play through this video, it's just a small snippet of George Ezra, it's not the full thing. When we get to about 29 seconds in, we should see, there we go, that the iframe changes to the George Ezra website. Obviously the application varies based on context. This is just an example of how you might use that to augment, say for instance, a music video by providing additional content as the video progresses. Okay, in order to achieve this, I'll be using Adobe Media Encoder first off. Working version CS6 to align with the versions that are at college currently. And what you would do is you would add a source. So I'm going to add the source I've already encoded as it happens. And if I just click on this bit here, what I would choose is choose FLV. Now there's two types of container that can be used for this kind of activity in Flash, and that is F4V, which is Flash's version of MP4, and then there's the FLV. It's a little bit simpler working with FLV to achieve this, and so we're going to follow that route. You can also work with MP4 videos in Flash, but you don't have the cue points like you do, which is kind of important in this case. So if I just click on this match source attributes, I can change that to a different preset if I want. So for example I could lower the bitrate to medium quality so it's a little bit more compressed, bringing the file size down a little bit. But equally what I want to do is across here is add cue points, and for every cue point that I add at a specific time, by dragging across the timeline and then clicking plus, I can give a parameter name. And so this needs to be consistent, so as you'll see on cue point 1, 2 and 3 it's got a link parameter, and so cue point 4 for example would have a link parameter, and then I would give it a value. In this case it would be a URL. Now in the example I'm using, certain URLs will work and some won't. It depends on the settings of the websites that you're trying to include using iframe. Certain websites will amend their settings so that they can only be embedded when requested from the same server. But there's quite a lot out there that you can achieve in that regard. So then you click OK, and that will encode for you when you click the green button, and that will be done and dusted. I've already got a file, so for the first video all I'm going to do is walk you through some of the process in Flash. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a Flash file and put a video in the same folder or somewhere pretty close to where the video and the Flash file would reside. It's easiest if they're in the same folder. You can refer to folders outside if you wish to. So we're going to create a new action script free, and I will set the size of this to 854 by 480 in this case, which is roughly the video size that I've been working with. I don't really want it to be much bigger than that in this case, although it could be a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do then is bring in the FLV player component, which click on components, which should usually be collapsed. I want to be looking for video, and then I'm just going to go with the FLV playback. Drag that onto the screen, and you can resize it like any element on the stage. So I'm just going to make it match the stage size, although this is irrelevant, it will resize based on the video that it contains eventually. And what we'll see on the right hand side of the screen is that inside of properties the component has something called parameters, and these are things that we can set. And before I set anything, I actually need to put a copy of this video in the folder that I'm working in. So we'll just open this up and go to an earlier version from the video. Okay, that's the one that I've just encoded most recently. I'll paste this into here. So it's in the same folder, and then I'll save this file in that place too. So I'll call this one video test 3. Okay. Now, one of the things to be mindful, we will be creating a class file, and that class file will relate to the flash file that we're working in. If you've got multiple versions of that flash file, then the class file may break earlier versions if you continually saving like incremental versions as you make changes. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is add that video in the parameters so that it knows what to play, and then we'll test that. So click on source to edit that. I can browse, the video shows up straight away because it's in the same folder. Click OK, match the source dimensions. Click OK. There we go. It's resized it. So I'll just get that 643.60 what it's showing up at. Okay. And let's resize it in the window. And then we'll test that. So press Ctrl and Enter together. Let's see what happens. Okay, satisfied that has got the video running. I will save at that point. And the next thing we're going to do is to start preparing for the interaction that we want to build into this. So, with the video component selected, which shows up instance of FLV playback, I'm going to call it FLV player. I need to give it an instance name so that I can refer to it and what it contains using ActionScript. It also points out here the cue points. Actually, you can add cue points in this version of Flash, which is a new thing to me. That's quite useful, although I find it easier to work in Media Encoder because you can see more visually whereabouts in the video you are when you're adding these cue points. And that's one of the strengths of this method. Okay, so we've got the instance name to refer to, and then we'll go straight ahead and create a class. Now, it's useful to call the class something meaningful, so I'm going to call it video, but it could be main, whatever. Really, the convention is to start a class name with a capital letter. And I can't find it, so I'll get an error warning the first time I click this. Click it again, and it'll ask me what I want to use to create it. And it gives me a blank class file, like so, which I will save. And it needs to be saved as the same file name as the class that was defined, which by default it will do. I'll save it in the same folder as well in this case. Okay, so this is a basic class file. It's a description, it's a blueprint for a class which can contain various methods and also properties. So our video class is basically going to be used to add an event listener to our FLV player, and then to declare the functions that we will use in response to the cue points. So what I'm going to do straight away is I'll add my event listener, and this is quite a new event for those of you who have only really used mouse event before, or even occasionally enter frame. So this is called a metadata event .cue point. There we go. And I will create a function called CP listener. Eventually I will create this function, so I'm responding to it now. What I want to do really is to import certain things so that my code works. So I'm going to call video methods. I'll need to import the metadata event. Just make sure I get that. Although it should have been included in the line previously, I'm just going to double cover that twice just to be sure. And eventually, but not straight away, we're also going to refer to something called external interface. And this is what we will later use to allow us to speak to JavaScript using ActionScript. So basically speak to the page that contains this element when it's up and running. Okay, so the way a class works is that you import, so declare just inside the package declaration. Then you've got the class definition, and inside of the class definition you've got the public function, the constructor code. So the class name must match the constructor name, and the file that is saved must also match that name, and that is a convention. Inside of the class is where everything comes, basically your variables and your different functions, which are your methods. So I have already stated that I'm going to be creating a function, and it's public because I want it to be available outside of the scope of class itself, because I want people to be able to call this function, I suppose, really. CP_listener. That's what I've called it, and that is going to look for event object. And we're looking for a metadata event, a specific metadata event. If I'm going to do a strict typing, I will put in that it's not going to return anything in this case at this point in time. And then what I'm going to do is respond to the cue points. So I think the first thing we'll do is maybe just trace out some information. So what we're looking for is FLV player dot head time, which is a property of the FLV player component. So that should allow us, every time that we run this, if it comes across a cue point and if it works correctly, to just give us that information. So let's just save at that point, test that. FLV, that's my fault. I need to refer to FLV player, that's the instance name that I've used. So I'll just show you the error that popped up then. Because I typed just FLV, it's given me some hinting down here to sit on line 14. So it's usually there or thereabouts, could be the line before, depending on what kind of error you've made. It's telling me that it's undefined property FLV. Essentially what that means is I've not used the correct name in this case, but it could be that it doesn't exist also. There we go. Okay, so my first cue point is at 29 seconds. So we're looking for, there we go, and there's another one at about 44. There we go, 40 seconds. So we know that that's working, and so without any time to waste, we will then move on to just get some additional information up. Okay, so we can access the play head time relatively easily. We can also trace out specific information from the event object. So in this case, there are certain info that can be accessed. Just need some coding in there, try and include that in. Show that again. If code hinting is switched on, it should give me a list of things that I can access. So I press return and then it will put it in for me. Dot name, so I can find the cue point name, for example. And I might also want to check the type, just to speed things up. I'll copy and paste this and change the end property from name to type. It will go blue if it's correct. And also, it'd be quite useful if we could get out the parameters, our own parameters that we've created, because they're the most important ones really. So I created a parameter called link, and this means I will therefore be able to access that. Now link is a bit of a reserved keyword, to be honest. I should really use a different name, but it probably work in this instance. So let's just save, because you have to save your class files before you test them. If you're working in just a normal FLA file and working on a timeline with your action script, you can test without saving, but it's a bit stricter when you're working with a class file. It's also give me an auto save message. Okay, so let's move forward a bit. There we go. Okay, so let's pause that and now we'll look at what's popped out. So it's name, cue point 1, and the time should be before there, 27.723, cue point 1, event, and also you'll notice the link that I added to it, which is the homepage for George Ezra. For obvious reasons, that seems to be the sensible link to put into a video like this. Okay, so we'll stop at that point for this video.